Hello and welcome to Angst Doing OK's Coming of Age podcast. I'm Dan, and yesterday I recorded a podcast reviewing It Follows with Keith, Caitlin, and Olga, and we have that up right now on podcast services around the world. We decided not to put the full audio podcast, an hour and a half, up on YouTube. Instead, we have this highlight for you of a small section. I think it's an interesting discussion and it's worth putting up on here. But if you want to hear the full podcast, it's down below in the description. Please check it out and enjoy. Adults never get stalked, teens, but we'll help them try one story at a time. I'm Dan.
I'm Caitlin.
I'm Olga.
And I'm Keith.
What did you think of It Follows?
I really liked it.
Ooh.
I'm upset though.
Why? It was scary.
Yeah, it was scary, and I'm gonna keep thinking about people following me.
Which means I'm going to follow her at night, slowly down the hallways.
They found a nice balance with the characters where they felt very natural as people, but at the same time, I would say in some ways that's positive, and in some ways it's to the detriment of, like, no one really had a character aside from maybe Paul.
Because it was so atmospheric, even the characters were atmospheric.
Yeah, it was like I don't know that I would say personality traits of any of these characters. Other than, like, Paul is, like, the nice guy and Greg is, like, the tough guy.
Yeah.
And, like, I think that the main character, Jamie J, she performed her role well, but basically her role was I am petrified,
Yeah, she was
Right.
very defined by the actions that happened to her in the beginning of the movie that we didn't really get to know a lot about her at all.
Yeah.
Now, that's actually interesting because even though, yes, I would agree with you, usually that means there are no stakes.
Yeah.
But I definitely did not feel like there were no stakes.
Yeah.
There were stakes.
Yeah.
So the fact that they could do sort of ambiguous, sort of atmospheric characters and definitely have good sense of stakes is actually a pretty good strength.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing is even though I think that she is, you're not getting tons of information about who she is as a person, her performance is such that she feels like a real person. That's the thing, is they all feel like real people, but they're kind of sort of ill-defined. But she's definitely the most defined.
In terms of the characters and kind of feeling for them and connecting with like Jay especially, how much of it would you say is, for a lack of developed character? Is it about sympathy for, like, the victim? But at the same time, it's the question that I'm struggling with of how much of it is sympathy for the victim versus seeing her as trying not to be a victim. And I don't know how much the movie really said or did with that. Like, I can't really come to a conclusion.
It opens up the idea of agency. She is the victim, but she's also the aggressor, just like the other kid was the aggressor that passed it to her.
Yeah.
So it's her turning, part of the coming of age is the loss of innocence, which is conveyed with her agency, like, does she pass it, who she passes it to, etc.
Right.
How do you feel about the gender politics of this film? Something about it innately feels positive to me, but when I look at, like, the specifics of what occurred, it's hard for me to back that up. Because yes, she does take agency. Yes, she seems like a complex character. Like, she's not just like, oh, I'm the victim. But, like, she isn't the one who defeats the creature. And she is just, like, constantly destroyed throughout the whole movie, right? So
I would say that despite the sci-fi horror twist here, her story of her being both a victim and yet continuing to live her life, like, it's pretty realistic. Again, if you peel back the layers of, like, she was traumatized. That happens. Like, that's the reality. Like, she lives with her trauma. It takes her time to get over it. She needs the support of other people. They don't always understand her or know how best to help her. She retracts and tries to fight it on her own and doesn't always win. Her friends are sitting outside at one point and she's barricaded herself in her room. Like, those are not the actions of a hero, but those are realistic things that happen to people, to survivors. Yes. Yeah. Every day that you win out against it, you are surviving. So I would say that I don't know how much agency she really has. She has a life. Like, she wins back a life. She has a relationship. She still continues having friends. She learns to live with this. And that's kind of what the truth of the matter is for so many people, not just women, but people who have these assaults happen to them.
Her sort of heroism is in the continuance of sort of the mundane day-to-day structure of life, as opposed to, stereotypically overcoming or defeating the monster. Yeah. The fact that, she could have the down and then come up to a little bit more neutral is her heroism.
Yeah. And because there is this question of, did they really win? I would say that, again, that's something that survivors live with, where if you're looking, again, the illness thing of, will it catch up to me decades from now?
Well,
losing is winning.
And it could also, whether the illness or not, you could also just be, I'm always looking over my shoulder because I can't trust people anymore.
Right.
That metaphor is very prevalent.
Yeah.
Right.
Sort of on the note of Hugh, there is a sort of feminist egalitarianism with the fact that they treat it with respect that a woman did it to him. When she sends it to other men later, Jay, that's considered to be a big deal where she did something terrible too. So they're sort of, in a roundabout way, sort of acknowledging male rape. It's obviously a complicated metaphor, but or at the very least, the same idea of violation of passing the disease on without the person's consent.
It's not one directional.
Yeah.
Consent isn't just... Like, the issue of that isn't...
Yeah, if it was just a woman-feeding disease, then that would be ridiculous.
Yeah.
I will say where this movie, in my eyes, fails is in the politics of Paul, who straight up is very much the classic nice guy trope. He completely ends up getting the girl, even though he consistently is kind of a creep about it.
Yeah.
And he is the one who saves her. So there's definitely not great politics.
I don't like Paul.
Yeah.
For a variety of reasons. One, like you were saying, he was creepy throughout a lot of it. He sees that she's traumatized. He sees that she's not in a good way, and he still continuously tries to come on to her. And he even tries to use the idea of him saving her as a way to get in her pants.
Yeah.
And then he succeeds.
I think it's worth talking about the fact that so much of the main sort of intense first scene of her on the chair, on the wheelchair, is so much directly on her in her bra, and that was used in all the marketing materials of this is how we're setting it up and blah, blah, blah. I think that it sort of adds to the fear and the atrocity of what's happening to her. But I also do feel like there's some gazing happening.
Now there's two very important points that kind of almost counter it.
Yeah.
Which is, we discussed the first one, which is there is a significant portion of nudity in this film, but none of the main characters are seen as nude. And Dan, what was your explanation?
Well, my point was that the nudity is supposed to be horrific. It signifies something is off and wrong.
Yeah.
And it's not to be salacious, it's to be frightening.
Yeah. Which I think is great, and that does sum it up. I think that it was very much intentional. Yeah. Now, point 2 on that thread is you also have the recurring theme. Obviously, it's about sex.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's not just like, oh, we're using sex to build tension to scare you.
Yeah.
It is about sex, and it's about vulnerability.
Yeah.
So, yes, you're showing her that way, but you have to show her that way. That's kind of the point. And she is, she's in that state of undress. She's vulnerable. And just like the girl at the very beginning who was in her skimpy pajamas with the red high heels, now you've got her in her underwear with her red fingernails. So I think symbolism and the visuals, it is very valid.
I think that 99% of what we see in this movie is purposeful and intentional.
Yeah.
So for instance, something that I saw when she's in that wheelchair scene is that her undergarments are also, and I think this plays into this timeless idea that they wanted to have, are not very modern, and they are still very covering. And I think that and maybe that's why I thought she was a virgin in the beginning, because they kind of dressed her like one.
Well, and I think that they also were specifically going after the trope of the virginal
sacrifice.
And the only exception where you see more skin is where after she's been attacked by him and she's in white. That's when she's in white, and it's
that scene is totally earned in my opinion, because that's more about the horror than anything else.
But then if anything, they're playing with it again of she wasn't a virgin at the beginning of the movie, even though they clarify that more later. But she puts on this again, the pure virginal white after she's been attacked.
You said something that made me think about, I don't think we've addressed enough that a major trope in horror in general is punishing teens for having sex.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you could argue the entire premise of this movie is about punishing people for having sex, and that even when she does pass it on, she's still punished for it because she feels awful about it.
Right.
So, and also Greg dies and things like that.
And also she still always has to look over her shoulder.
Yeah. So if you just look at it on paper, it's hard to not say that the takeaway message of this movie is sex
is bad.
I innately do not believe that is the message of this movie,
right.
but I cannot argue against it that much.
You could source evidence.
Because they didn't give you anything.
Yeah, they didn't give me that much in the source of the movie to be like, sex is okay.
Okay.
But again, at the end of the day, I do think that the greater thing is like, sex caused this, but so did like shitty people.
Yeah.
Right.
But the one piece of evidence against sex is bad is that she wasn't a virgin when this happened.
Right.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
That is like the one thing, but that's basically a line and it's something that happened before the movie started. So I'm like,
well, I think here's a pretty simple way to sum it up is sex isn't bad, but bad intentioned sex is bad. And so to that extent, it still works because she wasn't a virgin, she wasn't a victim yet, but as soon as she was victimized by an act of sex, that was what was bad. So it's not saying sex is bad, it's saying
using
sexual assault is bad.
Yeah, using sex as a tool and using sex to
as a weapon
better your position in whatever way at the expense of others.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much for listening to this podcast. Our next episode will be on To All the Boys I Have Loved Before, November 6th, 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Feel free to also, just hit us up on the Twitters.
Just hit us, just like physical abuse.
At Doing Okay Video. Thank you again. And until next time, I hope you're
doing okay.
One more doing okay.
No.
Now that's the actual ending.